morning.
Morning.
Good morning. How is everyone this morning?
Ironically, a little bit stressed.
Yeah. Ironically, well, let's do our introduction before we go right into how our morning has been. We are Southborough Youth and Family Services. We are here on Coffee Talk this morning, and we are your hosts. My name is Sarah Castle. I'm the Director of Southborough Youth and Family Services. And with me this morning, we have Megan Island, our Assistant Director. Good morning, Megan.
Morning.
We have Shannon Knyman, our Program Coordinator. Good morning, Shannon.
Hello, everyone.
And we're so happy to have our occasional co-host, graduate intern extraordinaire, Lisa Avery Peck. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Cheers.
Cheers.
Good morning. So we started to say this, we're a little stressed this morning. We were a little bit late getting on because we have a new Zoom account, and I thought that we would be, I don't know why it didn't occur to me, we weren't going to be able to go live on Facebook this morning, but we discovered at the very last minute we had to switch back to an old account, so we were scrambling and the whole thing threw me off. But I don't know, did we advertise our change in topic this morning? Because we had originally planned to have a young man come on to talk to us about his recovery journey with substance use. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to join us this morning. So we had in our back pocket a topic that we were all excited to bring to you this morning that has to do with stress and coping strategies. As we've said in previous episodes, and kind of alluded to, we know how stressful a time it is in our history. There's so much going on between this pandemic, the elections, our children being in all sorts of various states of schooling. I mean, you could pick any one of those things. But we wanted to share with you our thoughts on stress, but also talk to you about some of our favorite coping strategies. So Shannon, you were going to lead our discussion today. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I think, like you said, that this is such an important topic. It was awesome that we went scrambling from one Zoom account to another. And so it just goes to show, I mean, it was this moment of, I don't know how others felt, but my blood pressure spiked for a second and there's a little bit of anxiety of, where is it, an email? Am I waiting for an email or am I waiting for a text? What's happening here? So it just goes to show that it can happen to all of us. And so stress being something that's part of the human condition, it's not always a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was wondering, Sarah, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Is stress ever okay?
Yeah. In fact, we really have to move away from the message of you've got to get every coping strategy you can think of. You've got to get rid of your stress because it's a natural human response. And we are doomed to fail if we think that way, because we're not going to get rid of our stress. Our stress is there for a reason. So in fact, if you think about the kinds of experiences, maybe like exactly what Shannon was just talking about, that your heart rate starts increasing and maybe your breathing changes. And both of those physiologically prepare you for action. And they actually prepare you to do your best in some situations. So you can rise to the occasion when you're under stress. And so it's really, really critical. There's actually some really interesting studies that say people who believe that stress can be good for you have a longer life expectancy than people who experience very little stress. So the belief that stress can be good for you can actually help prolong your life and make you healthier. So there's, I'll maybe we can post a link to it. There's this really great TED Talk Kelly McGonigal does on the upside of stress. Maybe we can post that on our Facebook page. But she talks about, all of the great things stress does for us and how absolutely critical it is that we change the way we think about it, because we create more stress for ourselves by trying to get rid of it, because it's there for a reason.
Right. And it also means we care about something.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's one of the strategies I'll share later on, just about how to reframe the way that you're thinking that might actually help you sort of regulate your stress response a little bit more.
Yeah. Now, speaking of stress responses, and Megan, what's a red flag? What are the red flags that we need to be looking out for when stress goes from being something that's normal and natural and even helpful to being harmful?
It's a great question. And I think we've touched on this in a lot of our episodes. It's kind of my answer is something that we've said many times, and it's when stress starts impacting your ability to function. So when you start seeing it affect different areas of your life. So if it starts impacting how you're functioning maybe in school, or if you're an adult, how it's impacting your ability to function in work, or if it's having an impact on your relationships. So for example, let's say you're a student and the stress is impacting you so much that you're struggling to get up in the morning to go to school, or if the stress is causing you to lash out at your family members or things like that. So when you're starting to see the stress have impacts on your ability to function effectively in different areas of your life, that's when those red flags are happening. And that's when you want to start looking and saying, okay, now this isn't just healthy stress, this is distress. Now it's time to start looking for coping strategies to handle this level of stress.
And maybe a question for all of you, what does stress look like for different people?
That's a good question, because it looks different for everyone. I would say some people might kind of go inward and not necessarily show that they're stressed. They might kind of just take it all inside, and you might see them isolating themselves and spending a lot of time on their own. Whereas other people might start to kind of get irritable and lash out at others, because stress looks different in everyone, I would say. So it can vary from person to person.
Yeah.
Some people might find that they're having trouble sleeping as a result of stress too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Eating too is another change in appetite, but yeah.
Right. Like the joke was.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say the joke has been, I mean, now that the election is coming to an end, but people were saying, the scale is going to say 270 before it does for one of the candidates. So stress eating absolutely was probably something a lot of people saw in the last week or so.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, I can think even personally, just even in my own household, differences in how we deal with stress. So, yeah, absolutely.
So maybe refocusing the conversation. So we're talking about, you can't sleep, we're eating too much. These are things that maybe we're doing because we're stressed out, but maybe let's turn the topic so that we're talking about what can we do? What are some coping strategies? So Lisa, so for example, for you personally, what are things that you like to do when you're feeling stressed? And maybe if you have one or two examples to share that you like to use with clients.
So I like to do, for myself, one of two related things. One is that I like to do really anything that brings me into the present and grounds me in the present. So it could be anything from taking a walk, or listening to music that I love, or doing yoga, or even doodling, or making nice little doodles like Zentangle. can be fun. I made one. I started to do one earlier. I don't know if you guys can see it because it's in sort of soft pastels. But
Cool.
anyway, so that's one thing that I like to do for myself. Another thing that I like to do for myself is to do something that reminds me of a time or a place that was really happy. So that might be cooking a new recipe that involves, really fragrant spices or, really beautiful ingredients, because that makes me think of places that maybe I've traveled to, or even if I haven't traveled to them, the spices or the smells can sort of transport me to someplace else that's someplace beautiful. And for clients, what I'd like to do is, number one, I like to ask clients whether they can imagine a time when they were happy and feeling unstressed. And then I might ask them to tell me what they are doing at that time. It's sort of a trick of the brain to sort of switch out the time periods that they're thinking about. And then I'll ask them to tell me in detail, like what's happening, what does that look like? So that they can really sort of imagine themselves in this different, happier, less stressed place. Another thing that I like to do with clients is to ask them to think about gratitude journaling, because I think there's a lot of science behind the idea that if you can see how grateful you are for things, even small things, that makes you feel better and less stressed.
Right. Yeah, because with gratitude journaling, it can be hard because you're thinking big picture, and it's those little things, making yourself really stop and think about them. So, yeah.
Exactly. Even something as small as, oh my gosh, it's a gorgeous sunny day and the sky is blue.
Yeah. How about you, Sarah? What do you personally like to do to de-stress, and what do you tell clients to do?
Well, I tend to be a talker, and actually, I mentioned Kelly McGonigal's TED Talk. She was talking about how stress actually makes you social. So maybe this is going back to one of the benefits. There's hormones that the brain releases that actually cause you to engage in social activities. So things like craving physical contact from other people, which is hard right now, right? So we gotta go up to your 8-year-old son and be like, "Can I have a hug?" And he's like, but you take it where you can get it, your dog or whomever. But it increases your levels of empathy and wanting to be helpful. And so that's sort of some of the science that's behind it. But so that makes some sense. That resonates for me because I tend to need to talk when I'm stressed out, and engage, get help from other people. And, I've got certain people in my circles that I talk to about different things. So, but I also really enjoy sleep. And we could spend a whole episode talking about sleep hygiene, but I actually get at least 8 hours of sleep a night. I'm in bed by like 7:30 sometimes, but it really is critical to my ability to cope with stress. And I have a little bit of an art showing here. I love to help people with very sort of basic things that they can do to have a different emotional outcome. So I have an illustration here, and I know you won't be able to see this entirely, but this is a person watching the election and feeling some stress in response to that. And so a lot of times people think that a situation equals stress, but in actuality, there's something in between here, which is you have to have thoughts that go along with the situation. It's not a situation equals feelings. It's your thoughts about the situation, which is great because that means that we actually have the ability to have some control over our emotions. So in some situations, you can't change anything about the situation. You might be stuck, but you could change your thinking. and that might cause a different emotional reaction. So for this person, they say, this is so stressful, I can't stand it. Our country's going to fall apart if my candidate doesn't win. But so what I drew here is, that I'm not asking anybody to be happy about a situation per se. But if you said something like, I'm feeling a lot of stress, and it's clear how much I care about my country and how many other people care about this country. The fact that you might not agree, but if you think about it that way, and this is just sort of an illustration of that concept, but if you think about it that way, you might be able to move the scale from being in distress to a little bit of a better place emotionally. So that's one of my favorites.
Thanks. How about you, Megan?
Yeah, so personally, one of my favorite things to do, as you might be able to tell looking behind me, I like to read when I'm stressed, especially fantasy and like sci-fi for the escapism. I like to go somewhere that is not here, because it just kind of can take me away, and I kind of forget what's going on. And that really helps me de-stress and just get away for a little while. So that's definitely one of my go-tos to just relax personally. In my work with clients, one of my favorite techniques, similar to what Lisa was saying for grounding and really being in the moment, is a mindfulness strategy related to the five senses. And I like to use this one because your senses are always with you. And it's a strategy that you can use literally anywhere you are. And no one, if you're worried about people knowing, like, is that person doing a mindfulness strategy right now? It's something you could do anywhere at any time. So let's do it. So this one is also easy to remember because it's just five senses and you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the first thing that I ask people to do is to find one reminder too, is to try when you're going through this activity, is to try while you're going through the senses, is to try to notice things that you don't normally notice if you're in a space that you're familiar with. So for all of you, maybe you've been sitting in these spaces on a regular basis. Sarah, I know you're in your office, so you're pretty familiar with it. So try to notice things that you maybe don't regularly see. So first, find 5 things that you can see, and I'll give you guys a couple minutes in between each one, but you don't have to announce them or anything like that, but just kind of give me a little head nod once you've found your 5 things. And 4 things you can feel, and it doesn't necessarily have to be 4 things that you can feel with your fingers, but it could also be like the feeling of your body in your chair, the feeling of your clothes on your skin, the feeling of your feet in your shoes. Now, 3 things you can hear, and try to see if you can hear things outside of the room you're in, maybe even the sound of your own heartbeat.
It's very quiet in here. I can't hear anything.
Some spaces
I'll have to
that
try
might be
again.
Now it gets trickier. 2 things you can smell. And then the last one is 1 thing you can taste. And you could, if you have a drink nearby, you can take a sip of your drink, or sometimes I'll encourage people to like have a mint, or if you have gum nearby, chew a piece of gum. And the purpose of this exercise is to really ground you in the moment, bring you into the present moment. And this can be really helpful if you're really starting to feel overwhelmed by emotions, if you're really starting to feel anxious, it can help you really feel present and bring you into the moment.
I was gonna ask that, Megan. I was gonna say, when would you use this? So this is really intended for, if you're starting to, we often think of anxiety sort of as a wave. So maybe as you're kind of coming up that wave.
Yeah, if you're noticing you're starting to get to that peak, it can be really helpful to kind of bring you back down before you start to get to the top of that wave.
And actually, this one is my favorite because I do have panic attacks. And I find that even if I'm in like the grip of a panic attack, it's easy enough to be able to remember that. I know you were saying, like, try to think of things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. But sometimes when you're just absolutely freaking out, that it can be just that exercise of just like, okay, what are 5 things that I can see, 5 things that I can see? And then just the act of having to use your brain to do something else helps you. And then I find that if you do it a second time and you're a lot more mindful that second time, that it does tend to kind of smooth it out and help you ride through it. Yeah.
How about you, Shannon? Do you have, I know you said you agree with Megan, do you have a strategy that you like?
So, yep. So 5 senses is definitely my favorite, but the other one that I love is something that's called leaves on a river or leaves on a stream. And like I said, for me personally, I, especially during the beginning of the pandemic, I dealt with medical anxiety and I dealt with panic attacks. And so that one really helped me to be mindful. And so the idea is, it kind of goes along with what you were saying, Sarah, which is like cognitive diffusion. So essentially, like, you've got these thoughts and it's helping you to not be your thought, if that makes sense. And to be non-judgmental about your thoughts. So you're imagining yourself sitting. You can do a meditation where you're feeling yourself sitting, being very mindful of where you are, how it feels to sit. And then you're going to imagine that you're sitting in front of a river or a stream or whatever. And maybe it's fall and there are leaves that are falling off the trees into that river. And each of those leaves is something that is worrying you, that is stressing you out. It might be physical pain. It might be a personal issue, that you're dealing with a spouse or with a friend, and as those leaves go, you're just seeing them float by. So you're not thinking about how that feels to see that or to think that. You're just saying, so I'll use pain, for example, that I'm having a pain in my, in my stomach. I see the pain, there it is. And just allow yourself to let that float on by. So that, again, you're not judging the pain. You're not like, what is that? What's going on? Or you're not judging that feeling that you're having. You're acknowledging that it's there, and that by letting it go, and it's okay that all of a sudden on your mental stream, guess what? Here it comes again, because we're not going to get rid of it. It's not going to go away, but just to be able to learn to see it and to have it and to move along. So that is.
Sorry, I just had this is such a peaceful image, and I just pictured me going, you again, to a leaf. Get out.
Damn it, I get you already. With the minions, yeah. So yeah, so that's my
great.
Yeah.
Again, we could spend we could have a dedicated episode to, because part of what I was talking about and some of what Shannon was talking about too is kind of cognitive behavioral strategy. So you may have heard of cognitive behavioral therapy before. Some of what we've talked about too is about mindfulness, and actually I think hopefully we're going to have an episode dedicated to mindfulness down the line, because you've probably heard mindfulness. That's hard to say very fast 3 times. There's a lot of great science behind it, and we'd love to try to give you our best sales pitch for that, because it sounds lovely, but sometimes people need a little bit more buy-in to practice these things. And so hopefully we'll have an opportunity to talk about some of these things a little more in depth in future Coffee Talk episodes. But yeah, I think everything we talked about, you might not have my worksheet nearby, but you could imagine it, but these are all things that you could kind of try to do now. And like, Megan said, you've got your senses with you all the time, or your ability to think is with you. So what a great episode. I feel better already.
I do too.
So next week, we are going to do a special episode. It may be a little longer than it typically is, because it's a very important topic, but we're going to be talking about suicide prevention. Unfortunately, given the level of stress that a lot of people are under, we've seen an increase in suicidality in our country and our communities. And so we want to have some discussion about suicide, try to dispel some people's preconceived notions about it, and help point you in the direction of getting some support, some training. There's some really excellent trainings out there, and just kind of dispel some myths about it, to better equip people, and maybe they're in a place of ambivalence where they're not sure, if they want to know more about it. So next week, which is the 17th, we'll be talking about that. And we hope you'll join us. And we're so grateful you were with us today. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
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 Bye, everyone.